Staying with Daybreak, time now for the paper review. Shortly, we'll be taking a look at the big stories in the papers. And let me introduce our guests who will be helping us to take a look at that. From their right, we have Kipruto Arap Kirwa, former Agriculture Minister, ANC Deputy Party Leader. Welcome to the program. We also have Saulo Busolo, who is the interim chairperson of the Kenya National Alliance of Sugarcane Farmers Organization. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
We were expecting Phyllis Wakiaga, the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We believe she's on her way and will join us in just a bit. Now, after we take a look at the stories in the paper, we'll be getting straight into bulls and bears. And today our focus is on the sugar sector. And we're asking you what must be done to revive the sugar sector in this country. 22422 is our SMS line. Use the hashtag Daybreak, and the essential digits to call, because we want to hear what you have to say, are on the screen as well.
Absolutely. That question again, how can the sugar sector be revived? Just send in your views and we'll read some of them during this broadcast and also hear from you live on air as well. The hashtag is Daybreak, like Waigas just mentioned. And let's get straight to the newspaper review. Front page of the Daily Nation. Puzzle as Ruto skips key state function. That was the Huduma number registration. Launch of the digital registration was billed as a national activity projecting a united Kenya, with opposition leaders participating, but Ruto's absence ruined the plot. That's according to the front page of the Daily Nation, although he had explained that he had a state function to attend as well. Borrowing from
Which
Peter,
he felt was equally as important.
Exactly. Borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. Treasury officials are set to go on an international roadshow to raise 250 billion in Eurobond 3. In addition to the Eurobond, the government will be taking another 37 billion shillings from a consortium of international banks as a syndicate loan. Of course, you're the one who will be repaying all this as the taxpayers. Uhuru names tribunal to probe Justice Ojwang. President Uhuru Kenyatta has suspended Supreme Court Judge Jecton Ojwang and former tribunal to investigate his conduct. And then their front page still sting of death. Lawyer's son buried, father still in hospital. Freedom to cost governor 100 million shillings. Corey to testify against Judy in murder case as well.
It's at the top of the Daily Nation.
Exactly. Let's take a look at the Standard as well.
All right. The Standard has one big headline just at on the very front page. Kenyans wait for Uhuru's last bullet. Now, tomorrow focus will shift to Uhuru's State of the Nation address, and focus will be on what he'll say on graft, and what the Standard have done is they've picked different headlines or different covers of their front page, which all have the same theme. Corruption, different forms, different shapes, different individuals, questioned in regards to that. Yeah. And what is the president going to say that's different from what he said in the past? And at the very top of the Standard, how biometric listing exposed 5,000 ghost police. Uhuru leads CSs and opposition leaders in launching this new registration countrywide with the declaration that it will help fight the delay of service provision and corruption. In
fact, that's a good point to start. And we'll start with you, Honorable Kirwa. What do you expect the president to talk about tomorrow? In your view, what is the most important issue now? And do you expect this State of the Nation address to be any different from last year's?
Well, but I hope you will give us progress report on a number of things.
Such as?
How many convictions have we had? How much have we recovered from the assets that have been taken from the public? And what is the progress in terms of more and more convictions to come on board? Because what has happened is that it has been politicized to the extent that we are almost losing the plot.
What do you think happened to some of the president's previous promises? Lifestyle audit, austerity measures. If they have not been achieved, and that depends on what you believe, do you believe what he will say moving forward?
I think the president meant well, but you see, just like any other regime, there is always the bureaucracy that fights back in terms of some of issues like lifestyle audit. But I would have expected the president to lead by example.
Sorry for interrupting. You've been in government before. Tell us about this bureaucracy. So we've not been in government. How does it look? How does it...
What really happened?
What happened? Give us details.
I'm sure if you are to be appointed minister in charge of a certain portfolio, you will go there with a lot of expectations. When you go there, you'll be briefed for like 2 or 3 weeks. And those briefs are actually meant to slow you down, so that at the end of the day, you are not supposed to make decisions unless informed by the officers themselves. So it is up to you to listen to the officers carefully. And upon listening to them, you have to navigate your route, because you will say, okay, I need to move from point 1 to C. And if you are moving from A to C, you must navigate carefully knowing that some of the officers in the ministry, whichever ministry, they are also interested parties in some of the transactions that are going on.
Is it then possible to disrupt the system?
It's not possible, but a good minister must learn the system within 18 months of you taking over.
So now, that's more than a year.
A year, 6 months.
Yeah,
or so.
1 year, 6 months, a good minister. But some of them never learn until they're out of the ministry. So it took me 6 months, and I was getting briefs from the officers, and I was also getting briefs from experts in the industry. So that at the end of the day, I don't tell them I've been told this. You ask them intelligent questions that they are forced to give you the real answers.
And if that's at the ministerial level, what about the presidential level?
Well,
is it possible for you to actually give a progress report?
Unless the president has support of all the ministers and all the officers serving him at that level of the cabinet.
All right. Yep. Saulo Busolo, what do you expect him to talk
about? In my opinion, I expect the president to repeat what he has been telling us previously. I'm not saying anything new. He will probably talk about, as Weko said, previously he has spoken about lifestyle audit, he's spoken about corruption, spoken about Big Four agenda, and spoken about politics, the politics of unity, the politics of reconciliation. And I suspect that is what he may probably, engage in some little detail.
Okay. Well, let's also take a look at another story in the papers that might be of concern to many of you. And Trevor mentioned this earlier. Borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. Front page of the Daily Nation has a little caption there about that. Treasury officials are looking at raising 250 billion Kenya shillings in Eurobond 3. In addition, the government will be taking on another 37 billion from a consortium of international banks as a syndicated loan. And of course, this is money that you will pay back as a taxpayer in one way or the other. I want to take you to page 4, where there are more details about this. And there's a particular paragraph that stands out. And this was written by one of the journalists at the Daily Nation. It has been difficult to link the loans to projects under the Jubilee government. This is what the author is writing there. To date, the government has not yet released a list of the projects funded by the controversial 2014 Eurobond that raised to 80 billion. It has, however, put up a spirited defense of the process. Treasury has released bank documents showing that the first Eurobond came in. An audit firm, also PKF Kenya, was supposed to carry out a special audit of this. But the fact that the issue is still being raised means some may still not be certain about what use that money was put to. Kipruto, I'd like to get your views on this, even as we look headed back, that path very soon.
Well, it worries me a great deal because, as we've said before, by next year, half the revenue we'll be collecting will go towards retiring the loans that we've already borrowed. And that is before this borrowing that is now supposed to take place. It means, therefore, we are likely to spend 70% of the money that we're going to borrow, we're going to generate locally to retire loans. And this, therefore, means we will be left with 30% for other purposes. And that means the employment sector will suffer because we cannot borrow to pay civil servants. We are supposed to use our own internal revenue to pay civil servants. What does it mean? By 2020, where many of the loans will now mature, we are likely to run the risk of not being able to run the economy of Kenya. And we'll be sinking into more and more borrowing.
So what options do we have at this point, in your view? Because
options
we have
is that
financial burden as well as financial responsibilities.
I think what we need to do is to be realistic about the budget. We are talking of 3 trillion budget. I think realistically we should still be talking of 1.5 trillion budget, so that we do not give a lot of expectations to the public. The president needs to come out and say, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, the people of Kenya, we were overambitious in our proposals as Jubilee. Now let's scale down. Let us deal with realistic things. For example, if you intend to buy a car at the end of the year as a family, and you realize that you cannot buy that car, and you cannot take the holidays, you just stop buying the car and you stop going for the holidays so that you cut down on your expenses. Number 2, we need also to check some of the stalled projects, because when projects stall, there are certain costs that are hidden because the contractor might have moved on site and will be paying the contractor for work not done. What we need to do is to see how we can wind up some of the projects, the 300 projects the president was talking about. We need to wind them down so that they don't become a cost in the long run. Otherwise, we may say, okay, we are stopping these projects, but there is the cost implication. Because once you mobilize somebody to site, even if you was to leave a glass like this one, this glass will buy almost 100 glasses at the end of 1 year or 2 years. So these are some of the realistic moves we need to make as a country. And we should not be embarrassed. Jubilee should not be embarrassed. And Kenyans should be braced for that kind of undertaking.
All right. Saulo, what is your opinion? This is coming at a time when the Auditor General says he's unable to issue an opinion regarding the repayment of the 53 billion the syndicated loan from the Eurobond proceeds.
I think this is where the issue of accountability regarding use of public resources comes into the spotlight. When this Eurobond business began, I think the Auditor General did raise these issues at that time. But there was too much politics, you know, almost personal against him, that probably he didn't know what he was talking about. The Auditor General kept telling us he could not see any projects to which that money was put to. Yeah. He also raised the issue of this offshore account at that time, that this money, in fact, probably never reached, you know, this country. Yeah. Those are issues he raised then. And you can see there are still issues that are still with us. I think generally in life, the argument is you don't borrow beyond your means. And this country, I think, has borrowed beyond its means. So any talk of any development program does not make sense. In any case, a lot of the projects that were meant to be have now, you know, been scaled back. Having been scaled back, so any talk of Big Four, any talk of even economic planning, growth in this economy doesn't seem to make sense. So in the end, it's almost like if we continue at this rate of borrowing, the country could grind to a halt. But more fundamental is what model is this country utilizing for its development. I think if we continue this IMF World Bank business, we're not going to move anywhere. I think it's high time that IMF World Bank model of growth development needs to be interrogated. Okay. I think
so which model do you propose?
I think if we look at how countries like the Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, you know, have developed, in my view, they will give us a better, you know, kind of approach to what to do with the kind of resources that are at your disposal. Because some of those countries are not as resource endowed as we are in this country. Yeah. But the treasury, Mandarin, the thinking model at the treasury, and perhaps combined with the thinking model at the presidency, this Harvard model of training that infuses the World Bank, infuses the IMF, and generates, you know, bureaucrats who only promote those models. We know those economies always grind to a halt in the long end. So for me, I'll go for the East Asian kind of model for us.
Kipruto, there's this argument that the borrowing is commensurate to the revenue that it will generate in terms of development, number one, and also create jobs. Do you buy that argument? Because the president himself said some times back that there's no country that has ever developed without borrowing. Because the only other option then they would have is to tax Kenyans. Kenyans are amongst the highest taxed people.
But you see, whenever you have an agenda, it must be transformative. Yeah. As Mheshimiwa said, this World Bank model, where they go for grandiose projects, does not have any transformative agenda where they put more money in the hands of the people. What we should be doing as Kenyans is to say, okay, which projects are allowing more Kenyans to have more money and therefore the ability even to pay the taxes. People are avoiding paying taxes not because they don't want to pay, but they cannot afford. So what we need to do is to go for the projects that are addressing the people, the needs of the people, the mamauliage, the simple exercise, the simple businesses that we have in the village, the hawkers that we are now punishing. We must be asking ourselves, how can we bring in the hygiene factors that will assist the hawker to sell milk from to the neighbor without going through all those other processes? That is how we can allow money to move in the economy. But these grandiose projects, you are not assisting us, because when they are stalled, for example, if you buy a big truck.
Before you give the example, let's just bring in Maina from Nakuru, get his views, and then I'll come back to you. Maina, good morning. What is your question or comment?
Good morning. I wish to comment on the issue of allegation that we are borrowing beyond our means.
Okay, go ahead.
The allegation is not correct.
Sorry, say that again? Go
the
ahead.
allegation that we are borrowing beyond our means is not correct. The borrowing is correct. The problem is corruption.
Okay.
Because the money is not used for intended purpose. And this time we condemned corruption and supported the president in full force. The moment we begin to say project is sold, we should go into the roots and punish the corrupt and recover the money they have swindled. No nation has ever developed without borrowing. The nations which have been quoted there as lead models have borrowed heavily or have been funded heavily by Japan. The country, we are not supportive to Japan's intentions to support us.
Okay.
The Europeans who come with their money, they never give us value for the money.
Okay. Okay, Maina, thank you so much for that. Maybe just a quick question if he's still on the line. And that's an interesting point that you've raised. But some would say that the kind of borrowing some of these countries can do is different. Those are cheaper loans than the ones Kenya's getting access to. What do you say to those who would ask that question?
The question of borrowing from World Bank is critical. The World Bank is too exorbitant. The interest rate is very cruel. I think we should embrace the Far East in helping us grow economically. The Europeans are not interested to release us into economic growth.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Maina from Nakuru.
Maina from Nakuru. He says that the problem is not even the borrowing, it's the corruption that comes with it.
Well, corruption is a common factor internationally. There is no country you can say there is no corruption. There is limited corruption. So yes, I'm not saying corruption is a virtue. It is a vice that we must all fight. But the issue is that if you borrow for grandiose projects, and I was giving the example, if you are to buy a lorry in Kitale for 10 million, and you're supposed to be carrying maize to Moss Bridge, and there is no business between your house and Moss Bridge, that is a lorry that is going to be idle asset. Some of the grandiose projects will only generate income if the very society that we live in are able to bring money to the train, like the SGR. Remember what they were calling the lunatic express. It took so many years before the Mzungus in the hinterland were able to generate enough coffee, enough crops to be able to be carried by the train, and also the farm input to be carried by the same train back to the hinterland. So what we should be doing is, when you build the infrastructure, then you must make it link with the nerve center of the growth of economy, and this is the middle class. When you kill the middle class, which we are doing very fast, then you are killing the very source of transportation or the source of revenue for the same project that you are building.
All right. And on that note, we take a quick break.
That's right. When we return, we get straight into our discussion. We are asking you, what must be done to revive the sugar sector in this country? That's the question. How can the sugar sector be revived? 22423 is our SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. And please start calling those numbers, because we'll be taking your calls as well. Our guests continue with us. Phyllis Wakiaga will not be able to join us for this discussion, but we expect our business editor, Jay Bonyo, to also come in. He's been covering sugar matters for the last 13 years at least. And he'll be weighing in on this discussion.
Those insights would be very important to know, and we'd also like to find out from you, how can the sugar sector be revived? That's a question we are asking. There's already a lot of feedback coming in through Twitter.
Okay.
And Kevin Hussein Ahmed said, by breaking the cartel ring, period. It keeps it very simple, and we'll find out, because you're part of the chair, you're the interim chair of that sugar board. We'll find out what's really happening, whether there's even a cartel that exists there, Busolo, and you'll tell us that in just a bit. Zilopi says it can't, because we are a butter trade country. Sugar for milk. With Uganda, whose sugar production cannot feed a quarter of their population, but somehow can feed Kenyans. We'll also find out that as well in just a bit. But let's take a short break here on Daybreak. When we come back, that discussion about sugar. We'd like to hear your views as well.